The L-475 and the XH-51 finally began to return dividends in March of 1963 when the US Army announced a program to acquire a new class of helicopter, a fast, agile, and above all else dangerous helicopter that could carry weapons in a dedicated platform rather than the jury-rigged contraptions that had previously carried armaments. And this program was dubbed the Advanced Aerial Fire Support System. The timing could not have been better for Lockheed. Thanks to Irv Culver and his team's dedicated and extensive work on the XH-51, Lockheed had a big bucket full of patents and potential that could reasonably easily be the perfect helicopter for this program, and thus work on what would become the AH-56 Cheyenne finally commenced. The specifics of the Advanced Aerial Fire Support System program were lofty to say the least. It called for a helicopter with a dash speed, an emergency high power speed, which can only be sustained for a few minutes before one damages mechanical systems, of over 220 km/h, cruising normal speed of 196 km/h, very range, the maximum range of the aircraft when it has all non-essential components stripped and fuel tanks trimmed, ferried from place to place at 700 miles, and for it to be able to hover at altitudes of 5,000 feet or 1,000 feet. A lot of companies submitted designs to the US Army, with all of the big players of America's aviation scene making a bid for the contract. Only Sikorsky and Lockheed's proposals were shortlisted. The former submitted the Sikorsky S-66, and the latter submitted the AH-56 Cheyenne. The S-66 were very similar to the Lockheed AH-56 Cheyenne, and indeed both were advanced compound helicopters designed to use anything than US Army's inventory. But for want of a better description, the S-66 was a bargain basement design compared to the AH-56 program, coming in at a mere $66 million compared to the AH-56 at $106 million. Not to decry the Sikorsky proposal, however, rather it is indicative of the absurd levels of sophistication and innovation proposed for the AH-56. The S-66 had a rotorprop tailrotor which could rotate its axis to a 90-degree range to act both as a conventional anti-torque rotor in horizontal flight and as a pusher propeller, thereby transforming the S-66 into a compound aircraft in cruising flight. This was a great innovation, certainly, but Lockheed's innovations in stability and control just blew it out of the water. The proposed Sikorsky S-66 would have produced 3,439 horsepower, being powered by a Lycoming T55 turboshaft engine and able to achieve a dash speed of 390 km/h, a cruising speed of 340 km/h, a ferry range of 3,500 km, and is able to hover at altitudes of 5,500 feet. This was a fantastic effort by Sikorsky for sure, but nothing compared to the Lockheed AH-56, which was leagues above the S-66, both literally and figuratively, and it was selected for further development by the US Army over Sikorsky's craft. The AH-56 decimated the Advanced Aerial Fire Support System specification with a dash speed of over 400 km/h, a ferry range of 3,900 km, and it was able to hover at an altitude of 6,000 feet or 1,800 meters. Furthermore, it featured a retractable landing gear, wings that spanned 27 feet, and was powered by a General Electric T64 GE16 turbine engine mated to a gyro-stabilized rigid motor that produced 3,920 horsepower. It had a tail-mounted anti-torque rotor in line with basically every helicopter ever made, but complemented this with an additional pusher propeller also mounted on the tail boom. This pusher propeller was also reversible, allowing the AH-56 to decelerate and brake during vertical dives, allowing the pilot to enter a dive, then reverse thrust on the pusher to slow the aircraft down considerably, allowing him plenty of time to fixate on the target, fire, and then start his recovery. During vertical and hovering flight, all power was sent to the main rotor and the torque rotor on the tail boom, giving flight control relative to a normal helicopter, but upon transitioning to level flight, all but 700 horsepower from its mighty power was sent to the aforementioned pusher propeller. This made the main rotor all but redundant for generating any lift beyond residual windmilling, but this was in turn offset by lift generated by the craft's short wings. What's more, while the AH-56 may have had familiar flight control during vertical and hovering mid-flight, its performance was anything but familiar, with Lockheed's advanced fixed gyro stabilized rotor design giving it performance that is arguably unmatched to this day. The lack of hinges on its main rotor design meant that the airframe would follow the rotors directly with no delay or inaccuracy, making it incredibly intuitive to control. The gyroscopic control also meant that the AH-56 was immune to all but the most extreme changes in its center of gravity, being able to handle offset loads of up to 5 meters without any difficulty in control or input responsiveness. The AH-64's revolutionary performance was complemented by a similarly exceptional weapon system. Its primary armament was a fearsome 30mm XM140 autocannon mounted in a belly gun pod, which gave a full 360-degree traverse with advanced armor-piercing rounds, meaning that with this gun alone it definitely had the capacity to ruin anybody's day who was unfortunately in the crosshairs. Complementing the XM130 cannon was a front nose turret carrying an additional secondary weapon, either a 40mm XM129 grenade launcher or a 7.62mm M134 minigun with 100 degrees of traverse either side of the center line. The aforementioned lineup is all well and dandy, of course, and no doubt would have had infantry or lightly armored targets reaching for the toilet paper upon the AH-64's arrival into a hot zone, but what about tanks? How would the AH-64 fend off the vast armored columns of the Red Army that every defense analyst of the time predicted was imminently about to pour through Checkpoint Charlie? Lockheed answered this question with 6 hardpoints mounted on the AH-56 short wings, to which could either be fitted 6 TOW missiles or 2.75-inch rocket pods. These hardpoints were also compatible with a range of gun pods, all further increasing the AH-56's lethality towards soft and lightly armored targets. These gun pods seem to be pre-existing designs bought off the shelf and not designed specifically for the AH-56, such as the SUU-11A 7.62mm minigun pod, the SUU-12A 50 caliber gun pod, or the XM13 40mm grenade launcher pod. To further complement this terrifying complement of weapons, the AH-56 was fitted with an incredibly advanced weapon sighting system consisting of night vision equipment and aiming cameras, which all linked back to a helmet-mounted sight for the gunner. This early helmet-mounted sight was further complemented by the gunner's seat being fitted with a full 360-degree rotation, so wherever he looked, the guns looked. Furthermore, a fire control computer took the information from the gunner's helmet-mounted sight and, through the use of 2 gyroscopes connected to a Doppler radar, kept all weapons on target. For missiles, the computer compensated for winds and the movement of the target on the ground, meaning that the gunner could fire and forget and not have to adjust the missile's trajectory mid-flight. For the guns, the fire control computer automatically compensated for bullet drop and wind. Thanks to the stability of its rigid rotor design and the computer-controlled weapons, the AH-56 was also exceptionally accurate, with the 30mm cannon consistently being able to hit a 25cm target 3 kilometers away. To say the top brass of the US Army were enthusiastic about the AH-56 would be a gross understatement, and following our review of its features, it's not exactly hard to see why. Remember that attack helicopter technology of the 1950s and early 1960s otherwise essentially amounted to inaccurate rocket pods jury-rigged to the side of slow and crude transport helicopters. The US Army took to the AH-56 Shand like a pig to muck, and following an initial order of 10 prototype units in 1965, placed an initial production order for 375 aircraft in January 1968. All seemed rosy for the AH-56. Lockheed had produced a simply phenomenal aircraft years ahead of its time, and the military money men who paid Lockheed's bills seemed to agree that the AH-56 was indeed the best thing since sliced bread. But alas, a happy ending for the AH-56 was not meant to be. Not even 3% of that initial order of 375 would be produced, with a mere 10 airframes leaving the assembly line before the project was ultimately planned, and this phenomenal aircraft was just nothing but a relic, gathering dust in the corners of aviation museums, a monument to great bin. As we briefly discussed at the start of today's video, the United States Air Force plan. A cabal of senior officers perceived the development of the AH-56 as a most grave and personal insult. They hid their emotional knee-jerks behind various legitimate and professional facades, but when you go back and read primary documentation from the time, it becomes quite apparent that the Air Force officers involved were little more than petulant children throwing their dummies from the pram